PowerPlayChess, brought to you in association with Kagi. Round 10 at the Olympiad, the penultimate round, saw the big matchup between the old stars of the USA team against the young stars of the Indian team. It's interesting to see the lineups. Caruana, So, Dominguez and Aronian against Gukesh, Pragyanananda, Erigaisi and Vidit. Vidit, at 29 years old, is still younger than any of the USA team. So Wesley So is 30 years old. Vidit is 29 years old. And of course, Gukesh, Pragyanananda, Erigaisi, well, yeah, much younger. So that's incredible. So let me take you through these games. First of all, I want to look at the matchup between Wesley So and Ramesh Babu Pragyanananda on board 2. So I thought this was a tremendous game. So as I want to quickly, zip through all 4 games, I can't linger too long over some of these games, but I'll try to give you a complete picture. So it's a gioco piano, a very normal position. And we have these exchange of bishops. Normally, when these bishops are exchanged, then that solves a lot of problems for black, because this is the danger piece. But once this pawn structure changes, then this has significant long-term implications for black. It could be that black gets nice counterplay down the f-file. It could be that black's king, much later on, is a little bit weakened. Rook a2 I like a lot. That's my kind of move. Every chicken will understand the move rook a2 because f2 is potentially vulnerable. But at the moment everything looks normal. It looks roughly level. Black has a little bit of initiative on the king side. Knight b8 played. Could go back to e7. King h2. Right, well, I like this move. So it steps away from the bishop and prepares to push away the knight. So there it goes. And knight g6. And I think from this moment on, basically, I prefer white's position. You could say, well, these are quite normal moves. But this knight is poorly placed. That pawn on g3 controls those 2 squares. White is solid enough on the f-file. This pawn is well protected. Now, you can't really speak of an advantage at the moment. But just in the long term, I prefer white's chances, because these pawns have been compromised just a little bit. And, white could still play d4 here. And there might be a chance to play on the queen side. White has won a little bit of space. d5. Well, this move has consequences, because it means this pawn is permanently weak. Again, this is not a bad move, but in the long run, black has to be quite careful because of those pawns. At this point, everything looks fine for black, to be honest. Prag has a little bit of initiative, and particularly after c4, puts a little bit of pressure, but particularly after this move rook f7, because maybe black is going to double on the f-file. Maybe black is going to double on the d-file. We don't know. But it's interesting that basically Wesley has appreciated that his position is solid enough. And you can see that with these exchanges, then these pawns just a little bit vulnerable. And I repeat, I don't like that knight on g6. It's reduced to a very passive role just defending that pawn. So somewhere around here, it starts to go wrong for Prag. I like a5, that potentially fixes this pawn. Yeah, here I think black should keep the tension. And it's probably okay for black. Yeah, queen b5 or queen d6, queen e6, one of these moves I think is okay. But after Pragg exchanged, then it's more evident that these pawns are weak somehow. You know, they're isolated pawns. Now Pragg is doing this to get some nice piece play, but actually rook d2 eliminates that dangerous rook. Rook takes, and this is interesting. If queen takes, then queen a2 check. Now watch out, because that king is in trouble. It's in big trouble. I'll just show you one variation. If king h7, bishop h6. So pawn takes allows queen f7. And if king takes, watch this, knight g4 check, followed by rook h1. And it's going to be a disaster on the h-file for black. Beautiful stuff. So rook takes d3, queen c2. So the king is a target. These pawns are targets. Queen a2, queen e6. Ooh, this is starting to look really nasty. Pragg grabs a pawn, but this is a really difficult situation. This pawn attacked. Rook f1. Rook e7 played to defend here. And now, again, we have this beautiful tactic. Bishop takes h6. Fantastic. So interesting to see, you know, black's king getting taken apart here. If king takes, there's a couple of ways to win, but this one is pretty easy. Check. Here, you can see the h-file opens. And after this, check. And queen takes g6. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a winning attack for white, basically. So pawn takes played, queen takes. So material is actually level, but you can see that with these four isolated pawns and an exposed king against this beautiful compact mass on the king side, well, white has a tremendous position. Queen e6, of course the queen needs to be parried on f6, but it's interesting that simply knight g4, you see, if there's an exchange, of course black wants to exchange queens, but look what happens here. Rook a1 hits that one, and well, once one of them drops, it's going to be fatal. And if c6, knight b4, a pawn is going to drop, and yeah, it's absolutely dreadful. And that bishop is such a poor piece, actually, as long as it doesn't get into the game here. So a5, queen f5, nice move. So once again, the endgame is horrible. King g7 played, queen h5. Oh, we're back to the attack, threatening this. Knight h4, coming into that beautiful f5 square. And knight h6 was the final move. Here, Praggnanandhaa resigned. If queen takes, then a lovely fork on f5. That crucial f5 square. I've spoken so often about getting a knight to f5 in these gioco piano positions. It's a killer. So that was an important win for Team USA. Now let's go to the top board. Gukesh against Caruana. Now, I'm just going to zip through. A very interesting opening from Caruana. So it's a Catalan, and he plays rook, knight c6 and rook b8. So this is a little bit unusual. He has done this before against Mamedyarov. Actually, it was in the candidates. And the idea is to take on c4, and then you're ready to protect with b5, having taken the rook off the long diagonal. So therefore, c takes, and a little finesse. Instead of recapturing immediately, Caruana throws in this check. and then recaptures. So he basically wants to exchange a pair of minor pieces. Perhaps, use these outposts. Bishop g5. So Gukesh doesn't want a knight coming in here. So he exchanges off that knight. And an exchange on c3 because d5 was attacked. Castles and knight d2. So that pawn on d5 needs protecting, so knight e7. I mean, it seems to me that Caruana has come out of the opening as black pretty well. I mean, after this, I think white has a slightly better structure, but black is pretty solid. So there's a bit of pressure here. The queen might be better on the other side, perhaps here. But anyway, this seems okay. Yeah, a little bit of initiative for white. So Gukesh just pressing a bit. And now I think with hindsight, taking here and queen g6 would be, I think, the best option for black. But after quite a big think, Caruana went for c5, and I suspect he'd overlooked or let's just say underestimated Gukesh's next move. Now c5 puts a lot of pressure on white's centre. If pawn takes, queen takes, so that hits these two. That's good for black, or satisfactory anyway. e5 is quite interesting. I suspect Caruana had a long look at this before he went in for this. And this is very double-edged. So black has a bit of initiative on the king side. White can perhaps play on the queen side. But Gukesh quite quickly played queen a3. It's a very clever move. So the first point to note is tactical. So this pawn is hit, and if pawn takes pawn, e5 deflects the queen away, and queen takes, and that's better for white. In spite of all these pawns, white is under control there. So Caruana played b6, but somehow these pawns, they're pretty loose. Rook b1, very measured from Gukesh. And now he takes here. Of course, the queen defends this pawn now. Caruana went for d4. I mean, there are lots of interesting alternatives around here. d4 certainly gives black a bit of counterplay later on. Caruana could take here, but this is always black is always fighting to equalise here. You know, white is a pawn up there. Caruana took on c5, f4, queen h5. And let me see. So it's still level material, but f5 is an uncomfortable move for black to meet. This basically shuts out black's pieces. Let me give you an example. So what happens if bishop d7? Then knight f3. You can see the queen is very poorly placed on h5. Doesn't really have anywhere to go. This knight isn't great. Bishop isn't great. You know, white is threatening to take on c5, and that's very uncomfortable. So after f5, Caruana exchanged rooks and played queen e2. So he needs to somehow keep activity. F takes e6. Queen takes d2. At least Caruana is, you know, mixing things up. But there's no doubt that he's worse here. Queen takes c5. White is a pawn up. The king needs to hop back to safety. Rook f1. I mean, these pieces are not brilliant. That knight, if only, you know, we could have an octopus knight here, it'd be a different scenario. So Gukesh with white definitely better. King h7, okay, needs to tuck out of the way. And this is an excellent move, queen e5. So it's just keeping these pieces really bottled up with this pin. A check on e3, and Caruana fighting hard. You know, this is his only chance for counterplay, using that d pawn. I mean, that's why he advanced it a few moves ago. He knew he was worse, but he is trying to stir up trouble. Bishop h3, so this bishop looking to get into the game. Possibly on d7, possibly on f5. d2, okay, danger. Bishop g4 covers the queening square. And this is such a tough position, and Caruana was running short of time here. This is certainly just a very difficult position to play full stop, but when you're short of time, not easy. Queen d3. Attacking the rook. King g2, queen takes c4. a4. So that's a pretty random move when you know, your opponent is short of time. So Gukesh is just keeping the pressure, and I think just hoping that black will crack here. I mean, it's possible to take that pawn actually. Rook f7 threatens mate. Queen takes e7. You get a queen. Is black okay there? Well, I think so. You know, maybe that was the way to go. But queen c6 played. Queen d4 gets behind that pawn. But Caruana now plays queen g6, which it looks like a plausible move, but it's a mistake. Apparently knight g6 is the move, but this is really difficult to understand. Because after bishop f5, I mean, that just looks horrible. You know, you don't want to go in some kind of self-pin. But actually, queen c2, I mean, this is a computer variation. Threatening here, king up here. Rook f8. Apparently black is all right here, but it looks pretty iffy. I mean, to walk into this self-pin looks absolutely dreadful. Let's go back. I mean, it's really messy. There's also queen takes d2, but presumably black is all right in that position as well. Okay, after queen d4, Caruana played queen g6. Maybe this move was underestimated. I mean, it's an unusual move. It basically just secures these pieces. And then white just wants to collect that pawn. So queen g5. I mean, this doesn't help at all. That was a time pressure move, but it was difficult. And then queen takes d2. And now white has a massive advantage because black's king is about to be squeezed. So rook b8. Queen d7. This knight is the issue. It really is. Obviously it can't move because of bishop here. White's king is now safe because there's a nice safe square in h3. If rook e8, then h5, you can see the queen is disturbed here. It's horrible. So h5 played. Bishop e6. Bishop f7. The queen has to defend the knight in exchange. And now Gukesh is 2 pawns up. And this doesn't take too much effort. Excellent move actually, bishop e2, hitting that pawn. And after a5, you see, once you play bishop b5, that's the kind of move you dream of playing. The bishop is anchored on a beautiful square, and basically not a lot can happen now. Gukesh played king f2, and he's ready just to advance to d4, drive away the knight, and then it's plain sailing. You can push the e-pawn, you can go after the a-pawn. It's winning. So, brilliant win for Gukesh. So the score 1-all. basically after the first time control, it was 1-1. 2 games left. Now the game between Aronian and Vidit. Well, Aronian was plugging away, but he never had much advantage with white. Vidit was pretty solid, and even though Aronian managed to win a pawn finally, well, you can see there's too little material on the board, and unsurprisingly this ended in a draw. And that was that. So 1.5 all with 1 game remaining. So this was Erigaisi against Dominguez. And this didn't start well for Dominguez. So I'm just going to get to this position. So this is out of the opening. Bishop a6 has just been played by Dominguez, attacking the rook, which came to b3. Now you can see that black has these classic hanging pawns, in particular that pawn on c6. You want to advance it, but you can see that white has the c5 square under control. So this is a massive problem. So, I mean, apart from just taking it straight away, there could be, rook b6. I mean, there are so many beautiful moves here. Plonking the knight in. Knight d7 played by Dominguez. And, well, you don't want to take here because of that one. Hitting this and hitting that. You don't want to take here because of this one. So a few little tricky tactics. Bishop f1 and knight e5. This, when the king is getting dragged up the board, no, not good. Let's go back. Knight b6 played by Erigaisi. Excellent move. So this is just maintaining white's positional advantage and basically conquering a pawn without any drama. So if that's exchanged, well, you can see that pawn is just dropping. This is a horrific position for black. No real counterplay on the king's side. I mean, that's just lost. So Dominguez decided to ditch the exchange with c5. So he has managed to get these hanging pawns going, but at the cost of the exchange. But the thing is, this really only works if you can advance and get some play on the king's side. But actually white has too much control here. That knight is anchored. It's just really difficult to stir things up. And yeah, there's too much pressure here. The game went like this. G6, rook c3. Too much pressure. Erigaisi gave up a pawn, but you can see there's loads of pressure here. Let me just zip through here very quickly. And this is a key move, e4. So that breaks up those pawns, because if pawn takes, then rook d6. And knight takes, rook takes d5. This is what happened. Now, Dominguez fought valiantly here. But eventually, Erigaisi managed to work his way in. Dominguez still trying to cause trouble here. And he did actually. I mean, this is really difficult. For example, here. White's king was on the run again. It's really tricky actually. In this position, in fact, black can play king g6 and white still has to work really hard. But at this point, Dominguez collapsed. He played Queen G4. And at this point, H4 was an excellent move, opening up the king. And that must have come as a massive relief to all fans of Team India once those queens were exchanged, because now the king is actually in an excellent position. And Eragai's technique was superb. So it went like this. So that just prevented king takes for a move because the knight is hanging. And white to play and win. Check. Good technique. And now you don't push the pawn because then king here will come. You play king f3 first. And that was the final move of the game. Dominguez resigned because that pawn is going through. And that one has been well and truly stopped. So with that victory, India defeated the USA 2.5, 1.5. Massive result. Now that means that going to the final round, India are 2 points clear of China, and their tiebreak is superb. It would take a mathematical miracle for China to catch up. Even if India lost their final match, it looks like they're going to win the Olympiad. But anyway, we've still got one round to go. I'm sure India will be very, very professional in their final round. I don't know yet who they're playing, actually. I'm recording this before the final round pairings have been shown. So, yeah, who knows who India are going to play, but I'm sure they will absolutely go for it, even though it looks like it's a formality anyway. So, see you tomorrow for my final Olympiad roundup. It's always very difficult covering lots of games. I'm not able to go into as much detail as I'd like, but anyway, I hope that you still enjoyed this. And there's so much interesting chess being played. I haven't even mentioned the women's Olympiad. I hardly had time to mention them at all in these roundups, but that last round is wide open as India and I think still Kazakhstan are sharing the lead going into that final round. So watch out for that as well. Hopefully I'll devote some time to that, perhaps in future videos. Thanks for watching.